The city of Erilith never truly slept. Its great plazas were lit by the argent glow of 5 stacked rings, each the height of a cathedral, slowly revolving above the river gorge. At every groan of the mechanism, the air picked up a faint, chalky dust, and the citizens who had grown used to perpetual twilight tasted marrow on their tongues without ever asking why. The rulers called the devices perpetua, or when conversation drifted toward the unseemly bone wheels, they were said to be infinite machines, gifts from the founders that needed no fuel, no fire, only a single civic sacrifice. At death, every inhabitant relinquished bones to the city so that gears might be carved from femurs and ribs, teeth cut from knuckles, massive shafts turned on vertebral bearings. It was an honor, the priests insisted in their gold-laced vestments, a final patriotic offering that let the living feast on endless power. Nia Loren remembered the night her grandfather's coffin was wheeled into the harvest hall. She had been 10. A guard measured the corpse, recorded the probable yield, 10 kilos of tibia, 6 of ulna, enough for 600 kilowatt-hours a year. The numbers were stamped into brass tags and thrown into a ledger. Nia's mother wept and thanked the overseer in the same breath. The priest gave Nia a white candle and told her to press its flame against an ossuary wall that glowed with the city's own radiance, the glimmer of her grandfather's future usefulness. Even then, she sensed a wrongness in the ritual. Bones were bones. They decayed, warped, fractured. Nothing lasted forever. How then could gears carved from mortal remains promise eternal motion? She kept the question quiet while apprenticing at the Mechanical Lyceum. Talented students were invited to the spinal works, the vast foundry wedged beneath the lowest wheel. There she learned how the best cuts were shaped from youth's dense femurs, how infant skulls were brittle but perfectly contoured for small eccentrics, how Marrow's oil made an excellent lubricant once rendered. She learned to calculate stress lines, to chant the liturgy of arc seconds each time a shaft aligned. Every week, a funeral barge arrived, and every week she was told that the city's gift was endless. But Nia traced hairline cracks in gear rims, micro fissures that grew under the grinding load. She watched bone dust snow onto the walkways, swept neat by janitors before dawn. She logged each fracture in a hidden notebook and calculated. At present consumption, the city would exhaust every skeleton within 5 decades. Perpetua were dying. When she presented her findings, the Council of Stewards smiled like statues. "The wheels have turned for 200 years, the Minister of Resource Balance intoned. "Your numbers are in error." He tapped her notebook and slid it back across the polished bone-in-bone table. "Put away childish doubts. Our ancestors conquered entropy. All that is asked is obedience." Later that night, her teacher warned her to leave the ledgers alone if she valued her credentials, but credentials felt suddenly worthless. She had seen the fractures herself. She began to wander the lower districts after curfew, cataloging lights that flickered when the wheels momentarily stalled. In the gutter markets, she traded salvage tokens for bottles made of the old forbidden substance. Glass was brittle, the priest said. The way sin was brittle. It shattered under stress, could not be recast without losing purity, and therefore had been outlawed as wasteful centuries earlier. Yet sand was plentiful, and the gutter folk melted shards in pit kilns, blowing small baubles that glowed like captured dawn. Nia bought handfuls, tested them in homemade crucibles, and discovered that certain compositions tempered with desert ash became not brittle, but astonishingly resilient. More important, glass, unlike bone, was not finite. It could be melted, reset, reforged, endlessly turned back into itself, without cannibalizing the living. 2 months later, a tattered wanted poster appeared on the Lyceum gate. Nia Loren, accessing forbidden calculi, theft of civic funerary material. Her stipend vanished overnight. Her rooms were sealed, and the council's guard fanned out through lecture halls asking sharp questions. Nia escaped through ventilation ducts, clutching a single bag blueprints, some shattered green bottles, and a tiny gear she had cast from recycled glass the night before. It was no more than an inch across, but she had hung 2 kilos from its axle without shattering it. Glass could bear weight, provided one respected its chemistry. She fled past Airlith's ramparts, into the Scoria dunes, where scavenger caravans roamed. There she met Ashlyn, a broad-shouldered collector who traded in outlawed relics. Ashlyn's wagon was a cathedral of glittering rubbish, telescope lenses, stained glass shards, discarded window panes rumored to be as old as the city itself. When Nia explained her dream a wheel of recycled glass, a dynamo turning not on dead citizens but on relentless wind or river flow, Ashlyn laughed. Your dream's worth less than sand, engineer. But glass I understand. Show me a profit and I might give you a corner of my furnace. Together they built a workshop half buried in dune slope. Nia sketched her wheel not as 5 stacked rings but a single torus, whose inner race would be floated on magnetic repulsion coils, scavenged from derelict railcars. Glass gears would never need tallow for marrow. The wind would push vein set along the rim, and inductance coils would capture the motion as current. Night after night, against a ceiling of salt-bright stars, they smelted glass, and added manganese for toughness, cobalt for tensile memory. They failed repeatedly. A torque spike would spider-crack a gear, a sandstorm would pit the veins, but fill your top. They annealed slower, ground surfaces smoother, folded in filaments of basalt fiber. After 7 months, the prototype, 5 meters in diameter, spun with a whistle but no shudder. Power lines strung to a string of caravan tents lit every lamp. Tribespeople gathered, silent, to watch dull bulbs bloom with something gentler than the bone wheel's ashen glare. Children pointed. Elders muttered blessings to ghosts of sand. And somewhere in the night, the bone warden saw the unholy light. The raid came at dawn. Nia woke to the hiss of crossbow slugs shattering glass sheets stacked by the furnace. Ash unrustled a warden off the wagon's reins, but took a lance in the thigh. Nia darted through smoke, slammed a lever that released the wheel's anchoring pins, and the glass torus rolled down slope, gathering speed. She leapt aboard the frame, steering it like an improbable ship, while bolts flicked past. The wheel bounded across dunes toward the ravine called the Skinned Earth, too jagged for hooves. Wardens gave up pursuit. In the rubble of a collapsed mineral mine, Nia and Ashan bound wounds, salvaged what tools they could, and argued. "We can't outrun them forever," Ashan groaned, leg wrapped in blood-stained gauze. "We don't. We go back," Nia answered. "The only place to hide a sunrise is in the sky." Her meaning dawned. They would take the wheel into Airlith itself, into the shadow of the bone wheels, and show citizens another path. Fear tightened Ashan's jaw, but the logic was clean. If the city saw a self-sustaining light, the council's myth would crack like any too-thin sheet. They traveled by night, keeping the glass torus disassembled in nested segments packed beneath tarps. At the river ford, they bribed a ferryman with a promise. The first pane of glass cast in the new era would bear his name. Barge by barge, alley by alley, they infiltrated the city's forgotten underworks. Sewers laid down before bones became holy. Tunnels that still smelled of brick and iron. In an abandoned storm chamber directly beneath the lowest bone wheel, they reassembled the prototype. The hiss of turning glass was almost musical against the groan of bone above. To connect their dynamo, they tapped an obsolete conduit feeding the mid-river district. 2 nights of furtive wrenchwork produced a patched grid. On the 3rd night, the loom of festival lanterns rose over the city. The day of unbreaking had arrived, a celebration of the supposed moment when the first perpetua had conquered entropy. Public squares filled. The council gave speeches from balconies carved of femurs polished mirror-smooth. Wardens patrolled with bone-handled halberds. Beneath their feet, Nia and Ashen waited for wind. At midnight it came, howling through the gorge. The glass torus shuddered. Revolutions climbed. 5, 10, 30 per minute. Dynamo coils warmed. Amps crawled out along wire. And in Mid-River District, a shabby neighborhood that suffered rolling blackouts each celebration, street lamps flicked on in a perfect rippling wave, greenish, soft, unmistakably other. Citizens stared. Some knelt, thinking it divine. Others muttered the bone wheels did not glow like that. Nia cranked open a maintenance hatch into the plaza above. Festival crowds gasped at the wild side engineer rising from a pit. She took no podium. She thrust a shard of tempered glass into torchlight and shouted, "This is sand reborn, melted 1,000 times. It asks no life in return." Guards surged forward. Passion, limping behind, hurled a canvas that unfurled in midair, her spectral blueprint of the glass wheel, lines shimmering with phosphor. The crowd, hemmed against barricades, saw not a rebel but a mirror. They had all watched coffins wheeled into Harvest Hall. They all tasted chalk in the air. A low murmur built. Some women pressed small children forward to touch the glowing canvas, as if to test its solidity. Even the nearest wardens hesitated, their doctrine colliding with sensation. Somewhere close, a turbine purred without bone. High above, a sharper groan issued, the unmistakable hitch of a bone wheel missing a beat. Fractures Nia had tallied for years finally aligned. A gear tooth made from some forgotten soldier's shin snapped off. Momentum shivered along adjoining racks. Dust rained. Festival torches blew sideways under an artificial wind created by the stuttering mass of the wheel. The council's balcony shook. Panic rippled the plaza faster than iron rattles. Nia seized the moment. "Shut them down. You can put bones to rest." Then she vanished through the hatch before the next volley of bolts, descending to the storm chamber where glass continued to sing. The council invoked martial order by dawn. They promised the next week's funeral harvest would provide new parts, but now citizens questioned everything. Why did renewal require new dead if the wheels were eternal? Mid-River District buzzed with clandestine tours. People descended to Nia's chamber carrying jars of broken glass, candles stubbed in bottles, even the shards of bone-white serving dishes, long hidden from wardens' eyes. No soldiers followed. Rumor held the tunnels were cursed, and in their lanterns the walls glittered with quartz veins that made men see illusion. Nia welcomed each visitor, melted their offerings, recast gears transparent as spring water, let them place a hand upon the turning axle. The sensation cool, humming with possibility, traveled through calluses into imagination starved for alternative. When the council tried to black out the district, the glass wheel bore the load without a hitch. Bakers kept ovens hot. Midwives boiled water. Musicians amplified instruments for the first time outside state audit. A week stretched into 2. The council called her a necromancer, ironically. They claimed she siphoned the souls of the dead still inside bone wheels. But every evening the crowd saw lights fed only by wind's invisible fingers. Souls, if they existed, seemed happier here than in gears grinding to powder. Asian edited pamphlets from his sickbed, distributing them via messenger pigeons, diagrams of home crucibles, recipes for desert ash glass, instructions on annealing in brick kilns. Artisans in other quarters began forging their own small wheels-foot-driven lathes, water lift pumps, tiny dynamos that charged single bulbs. A patchwork grid wove itself under the city like fungal mycelium, alive, regenerative. Wardens smashed a dozen clandestine furnaces. 24 sprang up the next night. Bone dominance depended on monopoly of power, and monopoly was undone. The council's final gambit was spectacle. They announced the 6th wheel, a monument forged entirely from voluntary citizens, allegedly gifting their bones while still living, a proof of devotion that would shame dissent. They erected scaffolds in the grand square, displayed surgical beds draped in embroidered linen, and promised the harvest would be painless, exalted. But the crowd had begun to see through stagecraft. When the first volunteer was dragged, weeping, to the dais, someone in the audience threw a shard of cobalt glass that rang like a bell against the executioner's helmet. The square erupted. Wardens advanced, pikes lowered, but half their number turned the steel upside down. Their children slept beneath the soft glow of illicit bulbs now. Nia watched from the scaffolder's arch atop the southern wall. She did not lead the uprising. She had already planted the seed in materials, and materials led themselves. All morning she heard dismantling. Bone struts cracked, gears toppled, braces tumbled into wagons meant originally for coffins. Ex-priests tied rope swings to the ribbed spokes and climbed to saw free the spinal shafts. By dusk, the six-wheel lay in fragments, piled like a bleached whale on the plaza floor. In the weeks that followed, bone was buried or burned according to each family's right. Limestone kilns roared, melting glass salvaged from 1,000 forbidden pantries. The first civic edict of the Provisional People's Assembly declared, "No citizen's body shall be used as civic fuel." The second, "All knowledge pertaining to sand, silica, and glass-making shall be taught freely at public guilds." Nia was offered a guild office in the old council tower, but declined. Instead, she walked with ashen leg healing, humor intact, toward the gorge where now a dozen glass torii caught the constant wind. She pressed her palm to the newest axle. It hummed like a beehive, warm under winter's first chill. Above, cranes lowered the cracked tibia gears of the original bone wheel into carts bound for the necropolis, where volunteers were carving headstones bearing long-forgotten names. The perpetual wheels had not been perpetual after all. What now turned was something else. Iterative, resilient, capable of dying and being reborn without extorting another ounce of marrow. Sean exhaled. "You understand, we'll have to teach maintenance forever." "Better forever with sand than one more minute with bone," Nia replied. Yet even as she said it, she realized the lesson was larger. Nothing lasts without change. Not bone, not glass, not even revolutions. She resolved to document every misstep so the next engineer would know where cracks might appear. Night fell. The lamps along the riverbank lit a path of color emerald, sapphire, amethyst. Blown glass lanterns donated by each burrow. Children chased their reflections, seeing not the glow of death's dividend, but of their own handiwork. Far off, a final echo of crumbling bone rumbled as the last obsolete gear was lowered. It sounded less like an ending than a sigh. Wind turned, the glass wheels caught it with a quiet rush, and a city once powered by its ancestors' husks thrummed awake on the breath of the living.